So thanks for coming along to our Automate Your Workflow to Easily Manage Your Digital Media seminar. So hopefully you enjoy that. Today, what we're here today is to talk about, it's obviously content agents, the theme of the product, but one of the things we want to do is just start seeding that change of thought processes that we're going to have to do, or we are doing at this moment in time. And I'll just throw up a few acronyms in there, but I think those acronyms really present the merging of technologies and industries, etc. So, we've got film and broadcast, we've got new media, we've got IT, we've got consumer, we've got these connected devices. And now suddenly we're in the middle of that entire world, and we're having to deal not only with a wide-ranging set of standards, but also a wide-ranging set of media types that don't have standards. And that causes lots of complexity. But the reality is that these connected devices, etc., are actually key to our future for our business. And we have to deal with them. So transcoding as a tool is going to be fundamental. Everything we're doing is going through a transcoding process somewhere, and we need to think about those elements. So I want to start off. I'm going to introduce you. First of all, this is Owen. Owen is our product manager. Owen? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us today. So John and I put our resumes up because we're looking for jobs, but, well, no. I guess we wanted to just illustrate where we've kind of come from in the past, just to kind of give you, because Route 6 is probably a company you've not really come across possibly in the past. So very much so, I mean, my background, typical, I started for the BBC in London. We're a London-based company in the United Kingdom, but I've kind of gone through the whole NLE from the start, because I was one of the designers of the Lightworks product back in the 90s, which was a 24-frame offline editing product, which slowly sort of morphed into more of a general kind of purpose NLE. And then I decided I couldn't fight against them, I had to join them, and I ended up heading up product management at Avid for a number of years on Media Composer and Symphony, and being based in Boston. And then I went to Adobe after that for a little while. But then I decided I'd had enough of NLEs, and workflow is the way forward, and NLEs are just part of the workflow. So now, with the product we're going to sort of take you through today, we're really sort of talking about the ability to automate workflows.
So yeah, and similarly, you can see I'm a little bit older than Owen, only a little. And but obviously I came from an electronics background. I mean, that's what we were doing with tape decks and electronics, and probably the first part of the digital revolution. So really, let's say the idea was presenting that is understanding and managing change. And also, we need to think about applying tomorrow's thought processes to our jobs today. There's an awful lot of work goes out at the moment where we're trying to apply traditional workflow processes into modern technology. And we really have to get around that and rethink that, because there are a lot of advantages if we take that through. So let's just do a quick little introduction to Route 6. So Route 6 technology, we pretty much started in 2000. Initially, we were a software development company, and we were given projects to develop. I'm going to give you some history on this because there's some real validity in about understanding where Content Agent as a product came from. So our first project was for DHL. In 2000, we had to deliver a technology so that every employee for DHL in South America could have desktop video for training, corporate messaging, etc. And this is obviously a very large area of corporate communication today. So we developed systems in conjunction with Cisco. We brought new products in with SitePath to actually maintain very low data rate connections. We were actually given 16K data rates for 2 hours a day at one of the offices. So you can imagine the challenge of playing back real-time video across that. We actually use trickle servers, so we actually had servers located in offices, and we trickled media onto those. But the key thing was to develop an interface that those employees could actively log into. Would be simple for them to operate. They could view their media. It would database how they viewed their media. That became very, very important, to the point that actually the way the databasing of the media was done, it was actually used as part of the employee's appraisal system. And it says, well, why haven't you watched a training video? Or it went to the production company and said, well, a lot of people watched this training video, but they fast-forwarded this bit, or they stopped here, etc. So it's quite an interesting sort of first-time experiment, moving into a world of network topology, but also understanding the user interface and how we can make that simple to do, and also understand how the database and the feedback became very, very important to us. So that was a very nice project for us. That took a couple of years of work, and that was very good. Around the same time, reality TV was obviously very much born. Probably, we may say Big Brother's probably one of the founders of that concept. We were very much involved in the Big Brother projects. And from the first one, we conceived the issues of trying to manage that volume of media and how to transfer that into the half-hour program that had to go out every day. So, we had 160 camera streams. They were narrowed down into 4 video streams. Those 4 video streams will probably have 2 loggers per video stream who will be logging the media with database entries, locked time code. And what we do is we record that into a media stream with the time code and the database event. Equally, that video media was going on to tape at the time. And then what we would do, we would manage that database and present that to the producers. And typically what would happen, an event would occur in the Big Brother house, or in this scenario, we had Shattered and various other reality TV programs. And when that event occurred, through the database structure, they would work out the story backwards from that. And through the process of working out that story, they would be creating in and out points from the browse media to actually get their final conform for their tape when they derive in their Avid edit suites to do that. So again, simplified user interface, strong metadata management, and easy to use interfaces for the people. Thereafter, so probably some of you haven't come across Route 6 technology before, but actually we have quite extensive applications around the world. And one of the big ones was a set-top box technology that we developed. And the reason why this box was developed is we were at a time when the playback of a QuickTime, the playback of a DVD was really hard on the desktop computer in the agencies. And quite often they have a problem, well, my media doesn't play, it's all broken, I don't like this. And typically they didn't have the right codec installed, the hardware wasn't capable of doing that. I mean, a lot of those things have disappeared for us now. So we developed the set-top box technology that interface into an internet-based asset management system, which is where all the library was for the agency. They were then able to browse that library, select their clips and create their show reels, and those show reels were either created to play out in a presentation that they were doing to their prospective customer, or it would generate a DVD for them. So it just gave them simple DVD-style navigation and allowed them to play out that media again. So again, strong database in, very interesting that we interface into an internet-based asset management system, and then obviously the key to have this very high-performing player that could take any media type at any aspect ratio, at any frame rate, and return it into a video that would play back on their Power TV or their NTSC TV at the time. So we just removed all that complexity out of that system. And that was quite an important element for us. We had a lot of people chasing our media player. We still don't know anyone who can do the media player the way we do at this moment in time. So those technologies come out, and clearly, after being commissioned to do these technologies, quite interesting, the Beambot's still very much in use today. This is about 2004 when we did this. We did a software version. We get used a lot for award ceremonies. So Cannes, D&AD, some of the film festivals, where people would upload their images via the internet. We would pick that up. We would then database and create an asset management tag for it. We'd then be able to play that out in the theaters or the screens or whatever's going on. Typically, there's a live audience judging that. That judging is going on into a database, which is also interfacing into our Beambots. Okay, and what happens as the qualifying rounds go, so they're the 4,000 entries reduced to 100, reduced to whatever, we automatically create new reels with no editing, nothing all the time. So you can imagine that the labor involved in doing it was a fantastic saving, and we still get used for that quite a lot today. We even got extended into retail, so I think Nike stores around the world have our software technology for all their playbacks on all of their store monitors. So the real reason we're here, content agent. So following those projects, we obviously clearly saw an opportunity in the marketplace. Codecs were arriving very, very strongly in post-production and broadcast. They were overly complicated to do. The great example we had is someone spent £10,000 in post-production on their edit and all that, and the client says, "Oh, that's brilliant, I'm really happy here. Just before I go, can I have a QuickTime?" And the whole facility would just fall apart, because to generate a QuickTime, it's like, okay, I've got my Avid here, and I've got this one here, and I've got an FTP server here. I need my chief engineer involved. I'm going to have to manually do it. And it just took forever to do. I love this smile. You clearly had these problems. But, it was a real problem. And the idea is, well, we saw this as a big problem. How can we make this simple? We need to make a one-off box that was easy to use, that sat in the machine room, because the budget for making a QuickTime movie doesn't warrant your grading suite or your edit suite. We've got to get it out of there. So we made a content agent in its first iteration. And what it does, it just made that very easy. We could create the QuickTime, we could create the DVD, etc. on the system. And obviously we've now flowed on that product as the evolution of transcoding and deliveries and workflows has gone, our product has equally paralleled that evolution. So obviously our first content agent simplified the process of making these QuickTimes, or Windows media files were quite common then as well. We brought DVD automation, which we're going to talk about later on. We obviously had standard definition capture, we brought high definition capture. We then brought workflows, and we're going to talk quite a lot about workflows later on, but they're very key to us on there. Developed much stronger database functionality. We're going to talk about metadata later, and metadata really is key to where we're going at the moment. And then, of course, now we need scaling. We're dealing with a volume of material that we have to deal with. So everything's going to lead up to the current software today, which is version 3.1, and we're going to give you some demos of that later on. So I thought it'd be interesting just to add some of the statistics that are out there today, and there's some really interesting ones. About 8 months ago, I presented some of these statistics, and the interesting one was the YouTube upload. So 8 months ago, the statistic was 30 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube every 60 minutes. 8 months later, it's now 48 hours of content is being uploaded to YouTube every 60 minutes. Just obviously the whole connected media, the growth that's going on. It was interesting, I had 2 things that I sort of checked out today. Love Films obviously announced that their streaming service has overtaken their DVD and Blu-ray rentals now. Digital ad spending is predicted to overtake print. So this is your digital signage, this is your connected media, your iPads, your video on demands, etc. It's completely overtaking print in the commercial world, and that's a big area that we work in very, very strongly. So there's a lot of going back. So I really want to sort of bring those thoughts together to you. So just to let you know, so around this room, so the key things with dealing with this is we've got to have automation. Why do we have to have automation? Because the cost of being involved with every clip, A, it's very expensive, and B, we just don't have the time to be involved with every clip. We need automation. We've got to have flexibility. We're mixing that consumer, that broadcast, that film, we're mixing all of these environments. So we need the flexibility not only to deal with color space issues. I don't everyone's come across where you transcode from one format to another format and then your colors are too high or they're washed out, etc. But we also need flexibility of frame rates. You know, we just did a project for the Google movie, Life in the Day, last year. We had 60 different frame rates in that project for a 24 frame feature. Okay, we had to be able to deal with it, and there were ways obviously we had to deal with those things. Managing metadata. If you want automation, you need metadata. That's really, really critical. And we're going to be talking a lot about metadata, and especially about how broadcasters are accepting metadata for file-based deliveries. We obviously know about YouTubes and iTunes that we have to deliver metadata to. We're now talking about XML scripts, etc. So we can talk about that. We need scaling to cope with the volume. Okay, and then last there, and we've sort of phrased this as intelligent API. The reality is not one bot is going to do all your work for you. So hopefully you haven't come here thinking that today. But what we need to do is we need to interface. We need interfaces to other bots that can talk to each other. But that interface today is based on API. And that programming language, okay, allows you to actually get involved in every element of that program. But it takes away all the strength of that program. Because Content Agent is a very strong workflow program, we don't want someone coming in and rebuilding and redesigning all the workflows in their own software. We want them to take advantage of that and create, but utilize the API to make that API more intelligent, but the other great benefit, a lot simpler to produce. So actually interfacing with us from external products will be a lot easier. And that's some of the things that we're working on at the moment. So we're going to spend the next part of the session just taking you through Content Agent. So just to explain what we've got here, we have a Content Agent blade. This system's running off of one new blade. I can show you that later on. We've got another Content Agent integrated into Avid with ICEs. We're going to show about how we can check media into an Avid environment, including metadata on those elements. We've got automated DVD functions using the Rimage system here. So we're going to take you through those 3 areas, but we're going to focus on verticals and build you up to all of those verticals going on. So I think the key thing we want to do first is just talk about our generic system, you know, coping with the web, the connected devices, coping with DVDs, all that preview or all that dailies style things or even, you know, showreel deliveries, etc., which all comes as part of our standard package. And we're not going to talk just about transcoding, we're going to talk about workflow and that going there. One of the nice things we have is we have, you know, a fantastic set of customers, and I've tried to keep this orientated to North America, but you know, people like Harvard Business School and Boston University are great customers of ours, Then interesting corporates with Lockheed and British Aerospace over here. You know, we're actively doing that. Dick Clark Productions, God rest his soul, I presume we should say now, in the fact that all their award ceremonies and all their web deliverables now are all done through Content Agent because of the automation. They need high speed, high volume turnarounds, and they love us for doing those things. So I'm going to hand you over to Owen, who's going to take you through a quick Content Agent review. Here you go.
So one of the things John mentioned was usability, and Content Agent's been designed very much as a tool that once someone more technical has created workflows, and I'll come on to what a workflow is in our term of workflow in a minute, but the whole interface is, everything's designed to be done within this one interface. So we have lots of big kind of chunky buttons. It's designed to appeal to the most sort of untechnical person to be able to drive the product each day, or in many cases they don't actually sit in front of it. It's all done through automation. But typically, I mean, the system has its own folder structure, so you can basically create your own or handle your media and manage your media completely within this one interface, so you don't have to keep going out to the operating system and using kind of Explorer to find files. So, I mean, on the left here we have a kind of virtual folder structure, so this is where you kind of import clips into the system, and then you can kind of search for different metadata fields and just basically manage the clips as you want to, rather than being kind of forced to have to go out to the operating system. And we have a player built into the product, so we can kind of play files. So if I just click on a clip here, for example, we have a simple player, and you can do frame accurate sort of movement up and down the clip. We have other kind of tools within this player to do with adjusting gamma levels, which can then be applied for transcodes later on. We can do things like add DVD chapter markers, which John will talk a little bit more about when we talk about kind of automating DVD and Blu-ray authoring. But the system, you can see, is kind of lots of big chunky buttons. But the real heart of Content Agent is automating transcoding and other file-based workflow processes. So if I just head down to one of these virtual folders here, for example, and I click on standard workflows. So now I'm going to show you a kind of typical Content Agent workflow and kind of talk you through, typically in a kind of new media environment where someone's having to deliver a bunch of different formats efficiently. So the way Content Agent works is to automate a workflow, you first have to build one, and it works in this sort of flow diagram you can see here on the screen. So on the left, we have a whole stack of different tasks, and we call them nodes. And the nodes allow you to do all sorts of things like transcoding and unwrapping and rewrapping of files. We can do things like check the field order. So lots of clips coming in these days from different formats don't actually tell you whether they're interlaced or progressive. So we have a tool built into the system which will actually analyze the video and tell you that it's interlaced or progressive, because sometimes your transcodes will go horribly wrong if you don't understand what the source clip is actually set to in terms of field order. So the way it works is the flow kind of flows from left to right. So files come in from the left and get processed through to the right here. So if I zoom in to this a little bit more, you can see I've got this thing here called Platinum. So this is our own transcoding engine. So I've got various formats being transcoded here. And this is a typical kind of simple Content Agent workflow. We'll talk about a more complex one later on. But a typical file here, so for example, this file here at the top here is an MPEG 50 megabit file which is being produced. And then it's been emailed, well, an email is being sent to a bunch of users informing them that the file is being transcoded. And that happens as part of the automated process. And it's also then being uploaded to an FTP site to deliver to the client or to your facility's kind of FTP site, so the client can log on and view the clips. And then also some of the clips are actually being delivered back into our kind of file system, our media management system. So example here, I'm making actually a Targa image sequence. So this is quite a nice tool we have in the system where if you're doing work where you have to create single frames for a customer, And in lots of advertising kind of workflows, people have to deliver kind of frames rather than video. So here I can kind of make a target sequence out of a video file, for example. I'm making an uncompressed QuickTime file here, and I'm making an H.264 HD file here. But if we just quickly kind of go in and have a look at our transcoding engine. So we don't just do sort of basic transcoding, we have a number of other tools to make the whole kind of process more automated. So, I mean, we support kind of many formats to kind of bring into the system and export. We can make all the typical kind of MPEG files, H.264 files for kind of anything from kind of proxy files, viewing copies, up to Blu-ray, media. We can make kind of H.264 files for video on demand type of environments. So it's a kind of real transcoding workhorse. So you have many different, for different formats, you have lots of different sort of settings. But once this is all configured, it can get saved as a template, and then it just gets applied in a workflow, and this can be all automated through using watch folders, for example. And then we have a number of video options. We can do things like we can crop and pad clips, so you can kind of tell it to pad out a clip and put black around it if need be. We can change the aspect ratio. We can de-interlace files if you're going from an interlace file to a source file to a progressive kind of required finished file. We can use gamma level changes can be made to the system. So gamma is inherently an issue with QuickTime files. They tend to kind of get overblown, so you have to kind of bring the gamma level down a little bit when you're encoding to QuickTimes. And then we also have a number of kind of other tools. So we have audio channel mapping tools. So this is very important. So we can support up to 24 tracks of audio on the input and on the output. So for example, here I can just keep adding audio inputs, for example. So I mean, many file-based cameras nowadays record at least 8 channels of audio. So you can bring an 8-channel file in, and say you just want to mix it down to stereo for the output. You can just very quickly map audio tracks, inputs to outputs. So this is very useful when you, especially for things like international deliverables, where you've got different language tracks on different audio channels, and you want to sort of remove some of them potentially, or add more audio channels with different language tracks. And we can do things like we can do mono tracks and stereo pairs depending on certain formats. So there's a lot of flexibility in the system. We can also do things like we can support 16-bit and 24-bit audio. So a lot of formats now require them to be 24-bit, or a lot of international deliverables now are requiring audio to be 24-bit. So our system can take a 16-bit audio file and convert it to 24 bits, which is just a useful tool to have, so you don't have to go back into your Pro Tools or Audio Suite or editing system and do a conversion. We also handle things like for watermarking, visual watermarking. So we have a graphics engine built into the system. So this can basically allow you to burn text or a company logo into the picture. So you can, if you're sending lots of viewing copies out and you want to kind of protect your assets, you can add a visual watermark. You can change the opacity, you can change the color, the positioning. So this is basically text or a company logo. And we can also actually, in some workflows, automate the text. So instead of you having to go in each time and change the text, we can use metadata to actually change the text kind of on the fly. And we'll come on to sort of metadata in more detail later on. But if you have an external metadata file, we can import that in and actually use that metadata and apply it to a workflow to create the correct text for a video, the text overlay. And then we also have simple kind of frame rate conversion tools. So if you've got to flip things quickly from NTSC to PAL, for example, or PAL to NTSC, or from SD to HD, or HD to SD, we have a full frame rate conversion system built into the product. And then last but not least, especially around viewing copies, we can do things like burn timecode in. So we have a little timecode generator And again, you can kind of position it and you can change the font and the size and the color. And obviously not all kind of video files actually have time codes in them. So if you need be, you can actually tell the system to start at a particular time code value. And that can be based around all the typical SMPTE time code standards. And then in terms of sort of slightly more kind of automated workflows, that's just a sort of typical kind of example. Here's another sort of more interesting workflow where I was talking about this earlier, where we run a field order analyzer on the beginning of a clip. And this literally plays through the clip and checks to see whether it's interlaced or progressive. And then this is another very interesting tool in Content Agent called a decision node, and it allows you to ask questions about the source file. And depending on the answer you get back, you can essentially branch the workflow, so you can automate the workflow. So instead of you having to sit there and build up a workflow, the system will start to split the workflow. So for example here, in this workflow, we're asking the question, is any source clip coming into this workflow progressive? And if it is already progressive, great, then transcode it into a 50 megabit iframe MPEG file. If it isn't progressive, if I go in here now, I've actually turned on my deinterlacer to turn it into a progressive file. So we're adding image processing to that clip to take it from interlaced to progressive. So instead of you having to manually sort of work out which clips are interlaced and which are progressive, the system will work out what they are. So if you set up a watch folder for this workflow, for example, you could throw hundreds of clips into it, and some of them could be interlaced, some could be progressive, and the system will sift them out and work out which ones not to reprocess, which are already progressive. For the ones which are interlaced, it'll basically add a deinterlacer into the workflow. So you can see kind of how you can start to kind of build up more automation using Content Agent. And you can use this decision node for many, many different kind of automation ways within Content Agent, and we'll come on to that a little bit later, other ways to use that tool.
Okay, so what I was going to do is take you through just a quick DVD. And it was, I was talking, we have John here from Rimage, and we're just talking about, the use of DVD, and you sort of perceive, it's fading, but we're still finding a big demand for people, especially for award ceremonies, for when production companies are going to have to sell their videos, from retail, etc. They need that physical asset, and DVD is still really, really strong. And I got a spam email this morning from Trailer Festival, who were just saying, we've already had 200 requests for trailers on DVDs, and we're sending those out now today. It's like, there's still this physical media, and just being able to plug it in is actually a great bonus. So one of the nice things about the DVD function is it really highlights automation. It really highlights the use of metadata and how we're going to do that. So just to let you know, so I have my clips here. If I play this clip at the moment, I can actually sit in this clip. We mentioned earlier on that we can actually add metadata. So if I go mark that as a chapter point, I'm going to do this randomly at the moment. So I can actually actively mark chapter points in there. We can play our clips and we can add our chapter points. So if I go back into my NTSC, what I can do now is let's actually look at how we manage metadata. So you can see we've got our normal factual metadata, aspect ratio, frame rate, etc. on the system. But we've got this expansive tab now. And this expansive tab allows us to build our own metadata. So we've got our chapter points. But what most interesting now is I can add metadata schemas that actually reflect my asset management system, my archive system, my PAM, my MAM, those various elements. And what I've done on these files is I've used, this is the schema we do for Unilever for their library. So obviously they've got various pull downs, agencies, durations, but you can obviously design and build and create your own schemas on these things. So the beauty is I can now start using that. So I'm just going to jump to another clip just to show you on here. And you'll see here on this one, I've obviously got the Unilever metadata here. It's obviously got different labels in this scenario. So let's go to our burn disk menu. So here we are. So we have the ability to create optical disk, whether it's just for storage, whether it's a CD, DVD, or Blu-ray. I'm actually going to make an interactive video DVD in this scenario. I'm going to pick my media. So I'm just going to my folder there, and I just highlight all of those and pick, okay. So first thing we do is we analyze that media, we make sure it actually meets the criteria for a DVD, so aspect ratio, bit rates, audio selection, etc. We can then go into author mode. So the beauty is we're doing basic authoring for show reels, for dailies, deliverables. And so we get used a lot in retails, we get used an awfully lot for film dailies as well. So we've got various layers of authoring. We've got our base authoring, so this is going to tell us how the disc is going to behave when it's put into the DVD player. So I want it to start with a menu. I've got loop back and play all buttons here. It could have no menu and just be a loop back, playback DVD, which is what the retail have. So it just plays all the time when it's going in there. And as you can see, my media has appeared as buttons. I could pick a different background. You could obviously design a background, a bitmap, etc. on the systems. So if I went to publish that now, it would create me a disk image, and then I'd burn that, and I'd have an interactive DVD on it. What I can also do is I can now start utilizing my metadata. So what I've got here is I've got the ability to add filters. And what filters do is they create playlists for us automatically. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a new one here. So if I now go into my metadata, and I'm going to say I want you to use the Unilever, and I want you to choose the brand, and I want you to auto-create playback list according to the metadata that's in that category. So if I say done, and as you can see, automatically now I have different playlists. I can either play all my media, or I can just play the media that's marked Axe, or Dove, or Impulse. And I've just used one metadata field to do that. That could be play all camera 1, play all series 1, play all series 2. You can automatically categorize those, and we've had a lot of applications using this. Well, I just did that. That's actually a very advanced authoring function to actually try and manually produce yourself, and I've just done that with metadata on the whole elements. But the beauty is we can also extend this. So again, I would have a disk image, I burn the disk image, and I have that interactive DVD, and my metadata will define my playlist. Owen mentioned earlier the templates. I could save this as a template. So here's our key code template for the day. Okay, so now what happens, when my next batch of material comes in, and I have to make the same DVD for distribution, for dailies, for retail, all I do is just link to that media and say, make me a DVD based on that template. And because the metadata is there, it will automatically build the playlist now for me the next time. So you can start seeing when you get into that repetitive mode, this becomes very, very powerful and very, very efficient on the whole system. Okay, just storing that template. Now in addition to this, we start extending this out. Now I mentioned earlier, one box doesn't answer all solutions, and this is where we start approaching web services. And web services are very powerful. Web services allow us to bring external applications, external systems, but within our GUI interface and within our things. And we've developed things. So one of the first web services we brought in was the Rimage server. So I've actually selected Rimage here, and now I can start managing this server. So rather than the disk image and me manually burning it, I'll actually manage the process of burning and creating the disk. So the end result of this workflow will be a disk popping out of the machine. But we can do a little bit more than that with Rimage. So what we can first of all do is we can map metadata. So what I've done here is I've defined the title of each clip to be printed onto the label. So now I'm managing the labeling, and I'm also automating the labeling with metadata. So I can, very quickly get, so there's my preview on there. Actually, if we come out of here, if I just go to edit the disk, we can simply go in here. Here's my label designer. I can go into my label designer, and all I've done here, if you actually look at the properties of that text string, it's actually marked as a merge field. I now know the properties of that graphic is a metadata entry, and then I can start mapping metadata to it. So now the end result of this is not only going to be a DVD coming out the end, but it's going to be printed, labeled, and metadata is going to be put on there. And I can do things like barcode and time of day and date, etc. So again, that can be saved, and that can equally be brought into a workflow to actually manage those elements. So as I said, we mentioned we've got John over here in Rimage. He's just going to talk briefly about Rimage and what's available to us. So I'm going to hand you for John for a minute, and then we're going to carry on from there. Go ahead, John.
Perfect. Thanks, John. As John alluded to, we're an extension of the automated workflow. We enable you to take your content, offload it to DVD or Blu-ray in a completely automated fashion. We have the ability within the device to record both DVD and Blu-ray simultaneously. So if you've got multiple installations of Route 6, you've got multiple jobs coming through, we can handle multiple jobs all at the same time. One of the unique features of the Rimage system being that it's a network device, it can be accessed from multiple locations within your organization. You can even, in some cases, use it outside of the Route 6 workflow for just a quick DVD burn or a copy of a master as well. So the system itself gives you the ability anywhere from a 50 disk input capacity up to a 400 disk input capacity, so it can be used for small runs as well as larger runs. It incorporates both, obviously, the recording and the printing capability. So when the content is sent to the Rimage system, it's basically hands-off. It allows you to move on to other tasks of the day, not have somebody manually there recording and managing the print process of your content. It also ensures that the right labels are applied to the right content so that you don't send the content out to the wrong content to the wrong person, which is certainly something that we all try to avoid. We have multiple devices, as I said. Depending on your work environment, we have a solution that really can fit your needs. Along with the Route 6, we also offer some copy protection schemes that allow you to protect that content that you're sending out if it's in a pre-release format or it's valuable content. But other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward. We are just an extension of this automated workflow, freeing up your time, allowing you to be more productive in other areas of your organization.
Cool. So let's just recap. So everything we've just shown for us is the base software, and obviously we've talked about the automation, that flexibility, that metadata. So in that scenario, we do a lot of things on performance. We really have optimized our codecs. So we actually had a project the other day where we had to do a lot of web delivery. So these were small files that we're doing, and we were creating those files at 800 frames per second. But typically you tend to standardize at MPEG as your measurements, whatever. We were doing 500 frames per second. This is on a dual 6-core system. Obviously now with HP we have the dual 8 cores, so we're about to start doing some testing on those. In addition to that, we take advantage of GPU acceleration, so we can use the graphics card to actually give us some even more performance for our H.264s. So all of that information and all of that workflow is there as standard on the system. So we gave you a quick demo of new media. We're going to talk about film, and film sort of brings us back into that flexibility. So we have various bundles now that apply the tools you need for the niche marketplace that you're involved in. So we don't bundle those in the base product and obviously increase the price of the product. We create the base product that does all of our internet-based deliverables, and then we say, okay, this is a film specialist area. We need to add the film module to it. And in film, we obviously have a different set of problems. Color is obviously a major problem. We need to be able to apply lookup. So we actually deal with adding lookup tables for DPX files and for R3D files. We work with Red really well in the fact that we support the Red Rocket card, giving us the acceleration for decoding that to 4K or 5K process. And we can also use it for rescaling the image. So we can get the very best optimized transcode from a Red file into an Avid DNX file, for example. So we can get a full 10-bit pathway, starting from the 16-bit Red file into a 10-bit DNX deliverables. And again, we utilize the metadata. There's a lot of metadata in the headers of Red and for DPX, and that comes through into our system, which means we can map that out again. So one of the nice tools we do for a lot of dramas and that are shot on Red is we will actually take that Red metadata and deliver into the Avid system, which we're going to show later on, the metadata into the header of the Avid file, such that when you open the file, you can see all that metadata within the Media Composer system. So a lot of good work on there and a lot of acceleration. So that flexibility not only gives us the tools to use film, but the other important thing is frame rate. A lot of systems obviously are based on broadcast video or whatever, and the fact that we have this infinitely variable, well, infinitely is the wrong word, but quite variable. So I was thinking that we were dealing with 6 frames per second conversions on life in the day, but we use quite a lot for mobile phone footage, for YouTube. You'll see YouTube on TV, and certainly the BBC uses a lot for bringing that media and getting it into a broadcast file standard at 25 frames per second or 29.97, etc. So we get used a lot for doing that conversion, and people really like us for that. Film, we have some great customers from film who are very good for us. Chapman University over here, they started up their film school with content agents right at the very beginning, and we've actually been working with them, extending the workflows for them. Technicolor, Deluxe, I think probably worldwide have about 17 content agents now. Every office of Deluxe has a content agent, with the exception of Rome. So I need to go to Rome soon, I think. So that'd be really good. And and various others. So again, I've tried to highlight people more appropriate to this region rather than internationally what's going on in the system. We're going to carry on through this now because there are 2 demos that we really want to lead you on to. And one of the hot topics, and this is probably one of the main demos, is broadcast deliverables. Broadcast deliverables are becoming very important to us because the broadcasts are really seeing the benefits of receiving files rather than tapes. I think we're all aware of obviously the scare we had with the tsunami and the concern about tape stock, and that was a real catalyst that we really need to get on with the technology of delivering files. But delivering files isn't as easy as saying, okay, let's just deliver a file to a server somewhere. We need to be like, how do we pick that file up? What's the process of doing that? And again, automation is equally important to the broadcaster as it is to post-production or production, delivering that file. So there have been standards that have been set now. In the UK, we have a standard which we call the AS11 standard, which means we can now deliver a single file which actually has metadata embedded into it. So I'm actually going to hand you back to Owen, I'm pleased to say.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar with AMWA. So AMWA is an organisation, it's kind of a consortium of different companies they basically devised the MXF standard and the AEF standard. And they've been, over the last couple of years, starting to look at file-based delivery standards. Because at the moment, there hasn't been really any kind of proper standards around file-based delivery. It's kind of whatever the client asks you for, whatever the broadcaster asks you for. But in a lot of countries now, people are starting to find that they really need to kind of have a very defined set of parameters based around a file-based kind of delivery standard. So ANWR have come up with something called AS11, which is basically been developed to deliver files for a broadcast environment. So we now have various customers using Content Agent to not only just transcode, be a general purpose kind of transcoding automated workhorse, but also delivering files for broadcast. So in the last few years, we've seen a huge number of our customers move to delivering IMX D10 files for standard definition, and then formats such as XDCAM HD to broadcasters for high definition delivery. But with the AS11, this is the first time a kind of a proper standard has been put together by a kind of a proper organisation around a file-based delivery standard. And it's not just about video, it also includes metadata. So in the UK, for example, the major broadcasters got together and formed a partnership called the DPP, the Digital Production Partnership. And what they did is they went to ANWR and said, well, we think AS11 is great, but we want to extend it to a lot more richer metadata fields. So they came up with a whole number of metadata fields which you have to deliver a file with a lot of metadata within it to the broadcaster. And the workflow I'm going to go and show you now is a typical example of that process. So if we go inside here, I've got this kind of predefined workflow here which I'll zoom in on and we can kind of go through it. So with AS11, the parameters or the formats which are required to deliver content it's a D10 IMX for standard definition or AVC Intra for high definition. So what this workflow does is basically creates AVC Intra files and then creates a number of other metadata assets which have to be delivered to the broadcaster. So the whole point of delivering all the metadata is it can be immediately sucked into an asset management and automation system and get basically configured ready for playouts. So a human doesn't really have to interact too much once the file is being kind of delivered to the broadcaster. So what we're doing here is we're basically kind of creating an AVC Intra 100 file. So if I open up this template, we're basically delivering an interlaced 422 color space AVC Intra clip as kind of defined by the Panasonic standard. And then we're wrapping it as an OP1A MXF file. So this is all part of the standard, kind of what I'm showing you here. And that's all kind of been done. And then after that, we're then taking a number of metadata fields and actually outputting them back into the MXF file to get sent to the broadcaster. So Content Agent has this interesting tool called an XML transformer, and this allows us to take any piece of metadata, whether it's technical metadata like video and audio parameters or actual user-defined metadata. So in the case of this AS11 standard, there's a whole number of predefined metadata fields you have to fill out when you deliver one of these files to the broadcaster. And this tool allows us to extract these metadata fields and build them into an XML file to send to the broadcaster. So if I just open this up, for example, there's a whole number of metadata fields here, like production number, synopsis, copyright year, various sort of other kind of elements around the video and audio in terms of sort of just telling the automation system what video format it is, what frame rate, etc. So this tool here allows us to take any metadata field and basically create our own XML file out of it. And once this is all being kind of pre-configured and you run the workflow, every time the workflow runs, it'll basically deliver this metadata in this format, with this kind of fields in this layout, for example. And we're taking all these metadata fields. I mean, John showed you earlier that you can basically create a metadata schema within Content Agent, and that can be applied to each clip. And then you could either manually type in the production name and the copyright year yourself into each Content Agent clip, or if you had some other system which had actually done that logging on, for example, some other system which had created those metadata fields, Content Agent could automatically import that metadata and inject that metadata into each clip. And then that's how we then managed to export the same metadata back out of Content Agent with the final AVC intro file, for example. So in this case, if I press preview, this is a very exciting XML file here with all these metadata fields. But this is basically kind of defined as part of the standard. I mean, a lot of the broadcasters are saying, in the UK, for example, if you don't deliver one of these XML files with the metadata in the correct format, in the correct form, they will reject the file and you'll have to redo it again or resubmit it. A bit like kind of the old QC process for a tape. They would send the tape back to you and say, it's been rejected, you need to create a new master and send it to us again. But one of the big aspects of going to more file-based delivery is automating not just the transcoding and the metadata components of the workflow, is also trying to do some sort of automation around quality control checking. So with Content Agent, we've actually integrated various quality control applications within Content Agent. So for example, in this case, in this particular workflow, I'm using a product called VidChecker by a company called VidCheck, which is a UK company. And this software allows you to check for a number of video and audio parameters, and then basically kind of tell Content Agent whether it's passed or failed. So if I quickly just jump out of Content Agent for a second and open up this web browser, this is the VidChecker user interface. So typically what happens is someone will create a template within the VidChecker user interface for all the different parameters you want to check against. And then Content Agent will basically run that template every time. So for example, if I just show you the kind of things you can actually test for. So if I go into templates here and click new template, there's a whole number of items you can check for based around the actual container and the codec and the wrapper first. And then you can go on to kind of more actual kind of video issues and audio issues. So for example, here I can sort of tell it to check for an MXF file, for example. I can tell it to check for a particular MXF pattern. So what will happen is the first thing when VidChecker gets handed the file to check, it'll immediately check all these parameters are correct. And if they're not, it'll fail the file and send me potentially an email saying, you've got a problem, you need to come and check this file. But there's all sorts of things you can check for. You can check for just the frame size, for example. Is it 1920 by 1080, for example, if it's an HD AVC intro file? You can check that it's actually encoded the file with 422 color space, aspect ratios, sort of pixel aspect and frame aspect ratios. You can check for things like closed captioning are actually within the file. You can check for the number of audio tracks, so simple things like that. Does it have 8 audio tracks or 16 audio tracks, for example? So in the case of the DPP standard in the UK, they're actually requiring people to deliver 16 audio tracks at 24-bit. So this is a useful tool to just check you have actually encoded 24-bit and 16 audio tracks. You can check for a start time code, and you can actually say what the time code start value should be. You can check for sort of simple kind of, whether it's more in the case of sort of traditional NTSC, whether it's drop frame or non-drop. But then we come into more sort of slightly more esoteric actual video checking. So this is something you traditionally do with scopes. So you can check for things like letterboxing and pillar boxing, and you can dial in all sorts of different tolerances. So you can say, for example, I mean, one of them is black frames. You can say, okay, if there's only 2 black frames in the whole piece, actually just warn me, but don't fail the job. If there's 10 frames of black, actually, yes, warn me, send me an email telling me I've got a problem here, I need to kind of re-encode the file, or we'll have a look at it. But you can see here there's a lot of different things you can check for. You can check for loss of chroma levels, black levels, gamut, color bars. So if you're always required to deliver color bars at the beginning of the clip, it'll check whether there are color bars, and if there aren't, it'll fail the job. Freeze frames. So if there's, for some reason, there's suddenly a freeze frame in the middle of your kind of 1 hour program, for example, and it lasts for 10 minutes, you know you've got a problem. And you can check for things like kind of quantization with sort of blockiness, field order, flashing frames. So this is quite important in Japan and the UK now. We have kind of laws around photosensitive flashing kind of frames, which all kind of cause epilepsy, typically in children. So this allows you to actually check kind of that the video doesn't have too many flashing frames with certain kind of algorithms. And then in terms of audio checks, you can check for things like the typical kind of the bit depth, the bit rate, how many audio channels, whether there's clipping, if there's a test tone. You can check for kind of peak levels. And then you can also check for loudness. So loudness has become a hot topic in the UK, but I know it's now becoming a hot topic in the US as well. So in Europe, I mean, there's all these kind of EBU, essentially specifications based around loudness. And what this product does is it checks against those. But what this product does, which is slightly unique, so there are other file-based quality control products out there, and we've actually integrated, there's one by Tektronix called Serify, there's one called InterSystems Baton, which is another one we've integrated with. But VidChecker is quite interesting because it actually does some fixing as well as just warning you there's a problem. So in terms of loudness, you can actually set the system up so as part of the workflow, it'll create the AVC intra file, it'll then, VidChecker will check that file, and if there are loudness issues, it'll actually correct the loudness. So rather than you having to go back into a Pro Tools suite or an audio suite or back into your Avid or Final Cut system and adjust the audio, it can actually do it all for you, and it'll write out a new file, which then will get re-encoded again as AVC intra. And it can check other things as well. I mean, VidChecker themselves are adding more and more fixing capabilities of the product in each release. So it can also act as a legalizer, so it can actually check, fix kind of chroma level issues, or for example, and then write out a new file. So once you've kind of created a template in VidChecker, essentially back in kind of Content Agent, we, as part of the kind of automation, we just will call up. So this panel here, for example, these VidCheck test plans, I can just select the one I want to run on this workflow, and once this is set, it gets saved as a template, and every time I run this workflow now, it'll run my AVC Intra template, for example. But I mean, one thing to stress is, I mean, they are fantastic tools, these file-based quality control products, but one thing that it's always quite useful still to actually do a human pass through for quality control as well, because a lot of these products, while they can check for a lot of sort of issues with the file and a lot of these more technical aspects. They can't check for things like whether the image got flipped, for example, or mirrored, or more of some of the creative decisions if there's been a sort of an error in. But normally, I mean, you'd like to think in the final edit that a lot of these things would have been checked before they kind of committed to creating the kind of final master. But what typically happens is once Vidcheck has done its check, it hands back to Content Agent a report, and we embed that as metadata into a clip. And then you can basically open up the report, and it'll tell you all the kind of errors it's found, or if you've asked it to, it'll fix those errors in terms of kind of the loudness or the chroma issues. And again, we use this thing called a decision load, which I was mentioning earlier, to ask the question, has kind of Vidcheck given a warning or has it passed? And depending on the answer, we then basically output the final file. So for example, here I've got it being output directly to an FTP site to go to a broadcaster's FTP site, for example, or this could be an Aspera or a Insigniant watch folder, for example, to send a kind of accelerated file to the broadcaster. And again, here I'm telling it to just do a copy out to a network path of my NAS or my SAN. I mean, that could be going to a watch folder, for example, for an archiving product to pick up the file and basically back it up to LTO, for example. So I mean, that's a sort of a simple kind of overview of a file-based delivery workflow. And we have a number of customers now running these type of workflows every day. They're using Content Agent to, instead of trying to tie up their editing system to make their broadcast deliverables, they're using Content Agent to do the deliverables and using the editing system to actually edit on and do the storytelling aspects.
Cool. Okay, so unfortunately we're running out a bit of time, and I think that we just want to do one last demo to yourselves. So obviously that's the broadcast elements. Again, hopefully you've got a good view of the idea of the automation. One of the last elements we want to talk about is post-production. And again, so you've started to be introduced to the idea of web services. So you saw QC tools, Rimage, all these external applications, but you saw they were seamlessly into our interface and management system. Equally, we can have us bring Mac render nodes in with Telestream episode engines actually onto the system, and we can manage those as part of our workflows. So one of the things we want to just very quickly show you is we have set up over here an Avid Interplay system, and we're just going to show you how we manage the delivery of maybe a file-based system into an Avid environment. So again, Owen's just going to quickly take us through that. We have, I think,
very quickly,
2 minutes. Okay, yeah. Thanks.
So we have quite a few customers nowadays doing reality TV shows. I mean, everyone's doing reality shows, and they're shooting on so many different camera formats now that they want to get to the point where they actually want to have a particular format as their standard for post-production. So in many cases, it's Avid's DNX HD codec. And we're finding a lot of our customers using Content Agent they'll shoot all sorts of B and C cameras on all sorts of wacky formats. And they just want to use Content Agent to turn all of that into DNX HD. And if they happen to have, say, an asset management system like Interplay, they want to use Content Agent to check the clips, transcode the clips, and check them directly into the Interplay system. So, for example, if I bring up one of these MPEG-4 files for example, I can actually, if I go in here, I can add some metadata, for example. I can have my Avid ALE metadata. So this allows someone to create their own metadata fields, which will then eventually, they'll be able to open up, for example, Media Composer, and under the clip in the bin, they'll be able to see all these metadata fields, not just the typical Avid ones, but we insert all these user-defined metadata fields directly into the clip. So in this case, if I add this metadata schema, for example, and then I look at the clip up here, I've got this Avid LE metadata field. So these fields here, where it's series title, episode title, program title, production number, if I had metadata within these fields now, this will get pushed through the transcoding process and actually delivered to Media Composer or to Interplay. So if I just quickly show you a typical kind of Interplay kind of workflow, for example. There's two ways. I mean, we support the ability to create Avid DNX HD files directly within Content Agent. So if you don't have an Interplay system, we can still make Avid MXF files, completely compliant Avid files, which then you can immediately, as part of the content agent workflow, you can tell the system to directly write those files to an Avid ISIS or Unity system, for example. So all the editor then has to do is refresh their system, their bins, and they can then see these new clips appearing in their Avid bins. So it's a completely kind of automated process. But in terms of interplay, if I just pop into this other workflow, for example, we've added in this latest release the ability to check clips directly into the interplay database. So here, for example, this is a very simple workflow where I'm making an Avid DNX HD 36 progressive 1920 by 1080 file. I'm writing it directly to an ISIS workspace, directly into the media files folder. And I'm also telling the system to create an AF metadata file. And then I'm telling the system to actually check it directly into an interplay database. So if we open up here, for example, what we're seeing here is a live view of an interplay system running in the corner over there, the thing making all the noise. So here I can literally sort of browse my entire interplay project structure and just choose which interplay folder to check the clip into. So once this is now set, when I run this workflow, it'll take whatever files are in, I've told it to turn them all into Avid DNX HD files and check them automatically directly into interplay. So they'll be ready for editing instantly once they're checked into the database. So it's a very simple kind of workflow, but it just, for an awful lot of customers, it's a real pain having to do these elements separately. First, you've got to find a product which will actually make compliant Avid DNX HD files. And if you want to actually add your own metadata into the files, there are very few products which actually allow you to enter your own user-defined metadata directly into Avid, and then also check it directly into the interplay system. And again, we have a lot of system people. I know he's itching to get going. And the other workflows we do a lot of in editorial is people create a QuickTime reference file out in their export tool in Media Composer or in Final Cut, for example, and then they just drop that QuickTime reference file, which is made within seconds, into a watch folder, and then the content agent picks that up and we'll do all the deliverables. We'll make kind of proxy files for viewing, we can make the broadcast deliverable files. But because it's just a QuickTime reference file, as long as we're sitting on the same storage system, content agent can see the original media files, so you don't have to sit there and encode the entire file first before you bring it into content agent. So it is making the workflow a lot more efficient. Right.
Thank you. Sorry. So we're just going to do a quick wrap up. So I think one of the things so hopefully, we started off the presentation talking about automation, we talked about flexibility, we talked about performance, and hopefully you sort of gathered the tools. And we're obviously on a very tight time frame, which we're blowing massively at the moment. But obviously one of the things we did talk about was scalability as well. And I just talked to you very quickly about scalability. This is an area we're very strong at because we've actually built all of that functionality inside the base product. So if I just come out of this one here quickly, is if I go to my Jobs tab here. So what I've got here is what we do is the way we manage it. Remember I talked to you earlier on about that we have that GUI software there that helps us drive the interface, but everything's actually run by this centralized server. And that centralized server is managing the distribution of workload throughout the whole system. So on this scenario, I've actually just got a single processor on here. But if I just go on here, what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to reboot it. So I'm actually going to take a whole processing engine offline to give you an example. So obviously now I only got a database and a GUI interface, so I have nothing to process my engines. So the beauty is we can actually just add more render blades, and the system can automatically pick those up, hopefully in the same way as it's just picked that one. When that machine rebooted it auto-attached itself. So we can add more render blades, plug them in. So even if we've got live jobs going through and we think, right, I need more render performance, we can buy a render license, build the system, plug it onto the network. It will auto-subscribe to the Content Central, and it will auto-distribute its workload on there. In addition to that, we've got to have resilience. So the beauty is, if one of those systems fails, someone's pulled the plug out, the Ethernet is actually hardware failed, it will go offline, but my jobs, although obviously will take longer, will be redistributed for ourselves as well. So the enterprise scalability, that ability to have redundancy, to reassign those jobs, so we can just keep workflow going. The key is with automation is you want to fill our machine out. Our machine is a 24/7 employee who doesn't ask for a pay rise. Okay. So it's really important. But you want to be piling loads of work in that you don't want to sit and man. And the worst thing that can happen to you is you arrive there next morning and it failed on the first job and did nothing. So it's really, really important. So the redundancy is built in there and the system there to do that, and we get used a lot. Okay, well, look, thank you very much for your attention and time this morning. So thank you for coming along.